I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
I'm Angelique Preston.
We need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is What's Next, a dedicated hour to have important conversations about the issues facing the marginalized and underrepresented communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario.
We're going to have some real healing. We've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truth.
What's Next continues our mission to discuss race,
Equity,
and the common concerns of Buffalo's East Side and beyond.
In the suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
All right. I'm host Thomas O'Neill White. I'd like to welcome back to our program Dr. LaGarrett King. He's the director for the Center of K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education at the University at Buffalo. He is also the creator of Black History Nerds Saturday School. And his next guest is also with us, Dawnavyn James, PhD student in the Department of Learning and Instruction and social media star. Thank you both for being with us today.
Nice to be here.
Thank you.
LaGarrett, you've been on with us a few times before. I actually think you've broken the record for most times on the show now. But for those folks who haven't heard of Black History Nerds Saturday School, tell us a bit about it. Is there a curriculum for it?
Yeah, so I'll give a little backstory for why Black History Nerds. But just Black History Nerds is a professional development sessions that happen every second Saturday of each month, and during Black History Month, we hold the sessions every weekend. But during 2020, I received a DM from a classmate who was following my career, and he just pointed out and said, "LaGarrett, I know nothing about Black history." And this is a Black guy, right? He's a Black guy. We went to the same school. He was one of our star athletes and went to a SEC school like I did. And he's a pastor now. And he just said, "LaGarrett, I know nothing. And I would love for you to tutor me, right, in Black history, right?" And during that time, I was extremely busy with all different types of, Black history stuff. And I said, well, what can I do to help him out as well as others, because I understood that he wasn't the only person that, just didn't know anything about Black history. So that's where the idea came from, right? I'm a Black history nerd. Dawnavyn's a Black history nerd. I mean, anything dealing with Black history, we want to know more about and learn deeply. So I came up with the idea of said, hey, well, why don't we have these 1-hour sessions on Saturday mornings? We're just a bunch of nerds that wake up on Saturday mornings to learn about Black history. And, nothing, you can grab your breakfast or coffee or lunch or brunch or whatever the case may be, and we just sit down and we celebrate, learning about Black history.
So what are the types of topics that you get into? I mean, because a lot of people will say, well, in school I learned about Benjamin Banneker, I learned about Frederick Douglass, I learned about Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, but there's obviously so much more to learn about Black history. So what are the type of topics you get into? Yeah,
so we focus both on, content as well as instructional methods, literacy. So our most recent one dealt with how to teach history through a Afro-Indigenous perspective, right? We've had one this year that looked at imprisonment, right, mm-hmm. and the history of that and what people are doing now. We had a session a few years ago teaching Black history to white people by Dr. Leonard Moore, my undergraduate history professor, and so we've had several different topics that we explore, and even when we focus on content, right, we try to take a different angle to that, because there's one thing about knowing about Dr. Martin Luther King, but really delving into his life. There's one thing about learning about Malcolm X, but really delving into his life. So in the future, we have, this coalition of history teachers in K-12 education, teacher educators who teach teachers, as well as history professors who come on to conduct these series.
So it sounds very robust. The structure is there for anyone.
Yes, it's actually becoming a destination for many people. Dawnavyn is going to do our next nerd series, in which will focus on K-3 education and Black history. So we're very excited about all those particular perspectives.
Yeah, Dawnavyn, I wanted to bring you in. Yeah. You are the next guest on Black History Nerds Saturday School. You were an elementary school teacher?
Yes, I taught kindergarten.
And you centered Black history into your everyday teaching.
Yes, absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, so something I noticed is that in the curriculum and especially the social studies standards, Black people were missing. Like, you talk about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, but what about the other Black people that did things? So I did my best to bring in, like, specifically picture books that center Black history for my students to learn from, and integrating Black history into science and math and literacy as well.
And how do you integrate it into science and math?
So, like with science, looking at plants, so bringing in George Washington Carver, learning about living organisms like Ernest Everett Just, who was a biologist. In math, looking at like mathematician of the day. So something as simple as that. Like, it doesn't have to be always so complex. So just really honoring Black mathematicians. And
Dr. King, you call yourself the head nerd in charge. Where's that moniker come from?
So it's a play on Lean On Me, right? So if some of the more seasoned audience members out there ever seen Lean On Me, you kind of know the phrase, right? Some of the younger people are still like, what's going on and everything like that. And Dawnavyn and our associate director Brittany Jones, they all think I'm gonna mess up one day and
say the wrong thing.
Say the wrong thing for Lean On Me. So, but no, it's just celebrating, learning, right? We don't have to learn for a purpose, but just for our being and our humanity. And so, as the head nerd in charge, our history nerd in charge, right? I see that as a very important, position for us to kind of push forward the learning of history.
What else are you trying to accomplish within this space?
Wow. So the center has so many things going. One of the things that I'm really excited about is our micro-credential that we are, hopefully going to launch in 2024 for teachers, right? So there's several states, including New York State, that have what I would call Black history mandates in their laws, meaning that each school district is supposed to teach Black history, whether it's a singular class, an elective, or
and that's
within
every district within the state.
Yes. According to the Amistad law that New York State passed, I want to say 1994 or 2024, something around that line. But what the problem is, a lot of teachers lack either knowledge or they're scared to teach Black history in a certain type of way, right? So the micro-credential through the center is supposed to help those teachers kind of approach and broach those topics that may be deemed a little difficult for them, as well as where to start, because even your best history teachers have a large gap concerning Black history education.
Why would a teacher be scared to teach Black history or teach Black history in a certain way?
Yeah, so several different concepts lie here, right? Number one, there are some tough historical things that has happened to Black folk, right, throughout our history, right? And some teachers are afraid to misspeak on certain topics, right? So whether it's slavery or whether it's a civil rights movement or whether it's just anything concerning lynching or even just talking about persons such as Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, et cetera, et cetera. I think the biggest and then we're looking at history teachers that pride themselves in knowing history. But when you kind of present things that they don't know, then they become a little shy and like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I've been teaching history for 20 plus years, right? So there is a kind of disconnect between what society and teachers know about Black people, and that's because we have a poor Black history education in this country.
Dawnavyn, do you want to jump in on that as well?
Yeah, I've been doing just some work with different districts, and teachers just, again, like LaGarrett said, afraid to say the wrong thing, and don't want to inappropriately teach, the enslavement of Africans and Black people here in America. So they're just really like restricting themselves from diving in.
Is there a right way to teach Black history, and is there a wrong way to teach Black history?
That's an interesting question, and typically we don't deal with dichotomies in terms of right or wrong, but yeah, right? There's a wrong way. Like, for example, right, there has been instances all over the country about teaching slavery through mock slave auctions, right?
Right.
Where, hey, there's a Black kid, or there are kids in general who are playing slaves. The other people in the class are playing quote unquote masters or whatever, and they're feeling and they're touching, and they're learning history in that particular way, right? There's been places where kids picking cotton in a cotton field, and slavery math problems that focus on violence and all that stuff, right? So
do you object to that type of teaching?
Yes, because I think in many ways that brings additional harm to to Black students, right? And to other students who look at this as something appropriate, right? Now, the slavery math problems inherently are not wrong, but the way in which they constructed those math problems could be very problematic. Oh, go ahead. I can do the proper way a little bit later if you have the question.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
So when we're looking at the most appropriate way to teach Black history, I think that requires kind of a rethinking of what history is. I don't.
Oh, is this the teaching Black history versus teaching traditional history?
Yeah. So it's this concept where typically in our schools, and this has been researched ever since the early 20th century. So, from scholars, for so long ago that the history curriculum has always, our history textbooks have always featured a Eurocentric way of approaching and looking at history, right? So, even up until 1976, you still had disparaging comments about Black people in textbooks, saying that they were happy being slaves and they loved their slave masters, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been in my lifetime, right? So you're looking at a history curriculum that has really focused on white men who were heterosexual and who were landowning, able-bodied, et cetera, and many times, Black people's perspectives and other people's perspectives were not even thought about, like within that. So when we think about Black history is really unique because Black history is essentially learning history from Black people's perspectives, their voices, and their epistemologies / ways of knowing, right? And that looks totally different from the history curriculum in which we teach now.
Just as a quick aside, you said you mentioned you went to an SEC school. Where'd you go?
Louisiana State University. Go Tigers.
Okay. All right.
Go Tigers.
I'm just going to say this. Watch out for my Kentucky Wildcats in this basketball season.
Okay,
We're back, baby.
Yeah,
we're back.
Because I know we're not talking about football.
No, we are not talking about football. Dawnavyn, I wanna get to you on your social media presence.
Yes.
Very strong there. You've got a hashtag called Teacher Drip. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so as a elementary school teacher, I still want to be cool and cute. So this really started at the height of the pandemic. My students were at home, but I was teaching on Zoom, and so I had an empty classroom. So I'm like, I might as well show people what I'm wearing because I'm still dressed nice, even teaching on Zoom. So that's how that started. And now that I am teaching a course at UB now it's called Professor Drip. So I still want to show people my swag.
Nice. And you've got a number of buttons on your jean jacket.
Yeah.
What are the more important ones for you that you're wearing right now?
I recently just got one for the cover of my book from my editor that she just sent. And then I have one called Believe Black Women, which I definitely think is important. And I have a Jean-Michel Basquiat pen, which is important because my students and I studied Jean-Michel Basquiat in kindergarten. So.
Did you?
Yeah.
Interesting. You mentioned it. You got a book coming out.
Yes. I have a book coming out October 31st.
Beyond February?
Yeah, Beyond February.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Beyond February, teaching Black history any day, every day, and all year long, is about my experience teaching Black history in the elementary classroom. So just looking at going beyond the people, going beyond the books, and going beyond the curriculum, but also celebrating Black history during Black History Month as well.
Yeah, there's always been an argument that, all right, well, we're gonna learn about Black people during the month of February, which is also the shortest month of the year, but it's like, all right, well, this is just confined to February. But now it seems like we're branching out a little bit more. Like this is more than just a month long. This is our history. This is not only is this our history, but this is the history of the United States. And it's got to feel good to have a hand in that. LaGarrett.
You know what's interesting about that, and just like we do a lot of times in the United States, we just take something, we mess it up, right? Yes. When Carter G. Woodson first created Negro History Week in 1926, the idea was not to teach Black people only one time per year. That week was designated to actually celebrate what we learned about Black history throughout the year, right? So Black History Month is really supposed to be just a celebration of what we've learned, right? Not necessarily a time to dedicate towards teaching Black history, but a time where children in schools would be assessed with different projects and all these particular concepts. The society would, just celebrate what the theme was during that particular year. But in essence, right, and Black History Month was selected because of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass's birthday, which fell in the middle of February, right? So, those two things I just want to clarify for the audience.
We'll be back with more after this.
Buffalo is home to many historical treasures, including architectural gems.
Central Terminal affected everybody. Everybody from the common man to the movie star walked this concourse.
Beloved community establishments.
They might get a glimpse to see Lena Horne. They might see Dizzy or Miles Davis, Charlie Parker.
And homes for local sports teams.
When we talk about an institution, Memorial Auditorium was an institution.
The WNED PBS original production, Remembering Western New York, explore some of these iconic structures and their connection to people who live in the region.
There was a time when Buffalo's Main Street was the focus of holiday shopping in Western New York.
Watch Remembering Western New York now on YouTube.
Hey, is this thing on?
Test, 1, 2.
Sounds great. Let's go.
The podcast world is overflowing with more than 750,000 podcasts to choose from.
But for great local podcasts, you can now go to one place, the new Amplify BTPM Pods app. Here you can discover content produced in Western New York and Southern Ontario, our own backyard.
With a wide variety of genres to choose from, there is something for everyone.
Listen to the best independently produced podcasts in the region, anywhere, anytime.
Download the free Amplify BTPM Pods app wherever you get your apps and begin exploring your local podcast community now.
Do you love theater? Can't get enough of Broadway shows? Join WBFO's Anthony Chase this January in New York City for Kimberly Akimbo and Juliet, Back to the Future, A Beautiful Noise, and Shucked. Show tickets, hotel, travel, and select meals are included. Space is limited, so don't delay. January 22nd through the 26th. Call 716-630-3731 or email rsullivan@nyaaa.com.
You're listening to What's Next, our place to discuss the important issues of our communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario. We want to hear from you. Click on the Talk to Us option in the WBFO app, and we will work to get your questions or comments on the air. Do you have a story or concern that we should be addressing? Email us using whatsnext@wbfo.org. Together we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
This is What's Next. Thomas O'Neill White talking Black history, education, censorship, and more with Dr. LaGarrett King, the director of the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education at the University at Buffalo, and Dawnavyn James, an author, social media star, and second-year PhD student in the Department of Learning and Instruction at UB. Dawnavyn is the next guest on Dr. King's Black History Nerds Saturday School program. And speaking of books, I wanted to get your thoughts on censorship, bannings. Where are we going as a country when we are deciding to do this? And the collective we.
Yeah. It's really, distraught when I think about it because, first of all, we had this manufactured crisis, right, that was not happening, in many schools, probably in barely any schools in, our country. But we do have a history of cultural wars, and cultural wars win elections, right? And that has always, happened since the late 19th century. But in many ways, these book bans and even banning or making Black history illegal within school districts are just simply telling Black people that our voices and our lives do not matter, right? And the most interesting, concept is, the fight against CRT, but the most ironic aspect of CRT is that this is what CRT is for, right?
Right.
To examine, all these kind of racist, institutionalized, systemic practices to exclude, Black people and other people of color from the body politic, right? So it's a real interesting, phrase because in many ways when we look at different book bans, a lot of these book bans just have Black characters in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Or Black authors.
Or Black authors, right? With limited, access to talking about quote unquote race and racism. Although, some of them do, but I believe that book that talked about Black hair, Black girls' hair was banned, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, no one sees this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it gives it continues to impress upon Black Americans that your ideas, your knowledge, your perspectives are not wanted in different spaces around this country.
Dawnavyn, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so, I expected it to just be books that center just Black historical events and people, but it is just kids being kids. Like, there's a book called Crown about a Black boy getting his hair cut at the barbershop that's banned. But we can't find, why are these books being banned? So, as LaGarrett said, it's just like Black characters being banned and just showing kids that even just you going to get your hair cut is something to be banned.
Yeah. How do we combat this? How do we fight against this? It's not. It's got to be. Seems like it's got to be something we have to do every day. In
a simple sense, we need politicians fighting against politicians. I haven't really seen that from, a particular party that begs Black people to vote for them every single presidential cycle. I'm sure in local spaces that may happen or whatever, but I just haven't seen it, right? But what's most interesting is that we are only a few years removed from what people have called racial reckoning, right? Particularly in the summer of 2020. And we had all these particular, allies and co-conspirators. And as soon as all of these, laws started to pop up, and it just seems like those people disappeared. And all the promises of 2020 just disappeared in a snap, right? And that's very disheartening because the power is in the people. And I truly believe that the people that are fighting against this are the minority. I think I read a article that in one school district, it's like one or two people who have
all this power.
That have banned all these particular books, and that's just not right? So if we had, and if I can be frank, if we had white people that cared enough to fight against these particular things, because Black folk have been fighting against these spaces. But if we had those same people who did all this performative justice within the summer of 2020 come out and fight this, then I think things would be a little bit better. But it seems like people just raised their hands and they walked away.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they put back on the kente cloth that they borrowed and came back and started fighting again. So is this tied into critical race theory? Because it seems like the hysteria over critical race theory has died down somewhat, but it's kind of morphed into this, well, we don't want you to read these kind of books.
Yeah, well, I think, we need scholars and people and lawyers to continue to examine what's going on through a CRT lens, right? And just help people kind of understand the language, help them understand how the theory is used to explain different phenomenon, and clarify a lot of different things, right? Because I don't think that people who have a agenda to discredit something so I'll say this: I've been a professor for, oh my goodness, like 12 years, right? I've been in education for 24 almost years, and I've studied critical race theory in school, as well as I've wrote a few articles focused on the CRT, and it's so much that I don't understand about CRT, right? And I actually take the time to read the most important literature that is situated, and CRT is still pretty relatively young in terms of education for us to really grasp all that other stuff. But to have people that haven't read as much as other scholars have read to dictate what people believe, I think is really sickening, and we need to kind of reevaluate who we listen to and call experts on these particular issues.
You feel the same way, Dawnavyn?
Yeah, I think banning the books is really about control, but I say read them anyway, so.
Can you give an example of trying to find that clarity to clarify these things?
Yeah, so I think particularly let's say one of the biggest principles of CRT is that race is permanent, right? Is something that's permanent in our society, and I think people people who believe in the goodness of the United States or believe in the goodness of people just simply don't want to believe that racism as a system is still present in our society. CRT scholars try to highlight how racism is still part of our society and how it restricts aspects of people of color, right? And of course, this can be with the book banning can be a perfect way to explain how racism, particularly systemic racism, because if you are banning books within a system, a school system, if you're telling teachers that they can't teach certain concepts around racism, a system, right? If you have government agencies are saying it's against the law to have DEI offices and policies, that's a system, right? I think it's real important for people to realize, so this is how, right? Because if the majority of DEI officers are people of color, now they don't have a job. Who's going to hurt? If teachers are being punished for teaching about race and racism, typically it's the black teachers, right? And now, you have less black teachers in the classroom. So all these things are cycles that systems play into racial equality. And if you get rid of those particular aspects, then of course, racism is permanent. And even in our gerrymandering, right? You have places like,
well, there's this case in Georgia right now.
Yeah, Georgia, but even let's take Mississippi as an example. Mississippi, almost 40% black. If not the majority population in the state of Mississippi, and if 90+% of black people vote blue, then at best Mississippi is supposed to be a purple state.
Yeah.
At best. Right? So we have to examine, well, what policies are making Mississippi just a strictly red state, right? And typically we'll see the congressional areas drawn in there and et cetera, right? So all those things are important for us to understand and not take for face value.
What are you guys listening to these days? What's on your playlist? What's on your Spotify playlist?
I like Beyonce. A lot of Beyonce, J. Cole. A lot of J. Cole. I listen to J. Cole almost every day.
Yeah.
And some Kirk Franklin. I sprinkle a little Kirk Franklin in
all
there.
Right,
a little Jesus every now and then.
Oh man, I'm shit. The same Boys to Men because I'm supposed to be the fifth member. I spread, so really for me it's 90s R&B. Sometimes 90s hip hop or early 2000s hip hop.
Okay.
I do some old school, old school R&B a lot of times, kind of going back to my mom and cleaning them on a Saturday mornings and everything like that. This new stuff I think I woke up one day real early at 4:00 in the morning to do some work.
Yeah.
And I said, let me play some of this, new stuff. And there's a song by Doja Cat, I think it was like Paint the Town Red or something like that. So I just put it on because I like the song, Catchy Beat or whatever the case would be.
Right.
But then the algorithm just took me into a different direction. I was like, what is this? Right. So I'm 90s all the way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I there's some new stuff I can get into, but a lot of it I'm just like I can't. I don't really identify with these artists like I do like a 90s or even like late 80s like hip hop. I grew up on the boom bap, so that's something I'm always KRS, Big Daddy Kane, Rakim. It's just interesting to see the culture, how far hip hop culture has come. Where we've passed the 50-year mark.
Yes.
And you've got a shirt on that's in that same vein. Where do you see Black culture heading? Not just hip hop culture, but Black culture generally speaking.
I don't know. I see Black culture just dominating, really. Like, I see a lot of Blackness, and I surround myself with a lot of Blackness, and I try to be as Black as possible, so that Black culture can be the dominant culture.
Do you have an issue with other cultures adopting certain aspects of our culture?
Not necessarily an issue. I mean, just give us our credit, really. I mean, if you give us our credit, because we know what you're doing. Like, right. It's not like you're hiding. Yeah, we see you. So just give us our credit and be honest about that. Like, you did not do that. That was us.
Dr. King, how you feel about it?
You know what's interesting? Black folk are so, creative. So when we see...
And resourceful.
Yeah, and very resourceful, right? And we have to let the kids do their thing. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, even as I said, oh man, I don't understand it. It's not for me to understand. It's not, as my parents didn't understand NWA and didn't understand, A Tribe Called Quest or anything like that. It's not for us to understand. I think, what I'm saying, we're getting to some more futuristic stuff, I think. Whatever that means, right?
There is an Afro-futuristic movement. I don't understand it, but I'd like to understand it.
Well, you know what I'm saying? You got, punk rockers, and you got, those who do art, and you have people who are kind of reimagining the future for Black folk, right? I think when we think about Black future, and I'm thinking this because that's our next conference in 2024, Black to the Future. But when we think about Black futures, we have to think about people are saying, okay, so what would society look like if white folk just left us alone? What would society look like without racism, anti-Blackness, sexism, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that's where, like, a lot of our young people are kind of thinking now. There are some excellent people that are doing some wonderful work, but really and truly, it's about reevaluating our past and seeing how we can push forward. And yes, what I'm saying, we do have the cool colors and, the different, wear and, spaceships and all that other good stuff. But, really it's just kind of reimagine what would society look like if racism and anti-Blackness just stop. Right?
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because in the earlier episode, you said there is a difference between racism and anti-Blackness?
Yeah. So when we talk about racism, we're talking about racism in terms of all people of color, right?
Right.
But there's a distinct aspect with anti-Blackness, because now, we're looking at how other races or racialized people look at Black folk. Right, so there is, this kind of anti-Blackness against Black folk. Of course, from white folk throughout history, there's an interesting connection between Asians and Blacks and Latinos and Blacks and all these particular groups of people historically that is more particular in the way that we look at how power is operated and how Black people are looked at in society. And then plus, when we think about just the concept of anti-Blackness is essentially looking at Black folk as slaves, and not necessarily someone who is owned, but someone who doesn't have agency, someone who needs to be civilized. And when you look at many of the different laws, even school policy of how these particular policies are enacted towards Black folk, you can see that people are kind of conflicted about how Black culture is kind of conducted, who Black people are, and there's always this teaching about who you need to be, which can be counter to Black culture.
And I think in that same episode, you said that racism is not necessarily the same everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, because in the South, when we think of the South, and I was born in Kentucky. It's kind of the South, but when you think of the South, you think of the Klan, you think of cross burnings, you think of that up front, in your face racism. And then, living in this area, living in Western New York, that racism is a little more subtle.
What's interesting is that, and I'm sure you probably feel this way as well, is that I love the South.
I love it.
I
love it. Graduated high school in Atlanta.
Yeah, and I love, being from Louisiana, from East Texas, from the Houston area, all these particular spots. So it's not necessarily like, people like, oh man, how would you like, why do you like Texas? It's like, well, the Texas that they talk about on the news is not the Texas that I know, right? And and it's not like the movies, right? It's not like when I grew up, right, that someone called me the N-word when I'm just walking down the street minding my business, right? That was never the case. What was the case, however, is we may not want to cross this, railroad track, particularly at night, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was some unspoken rules.
Yeah, we might want to we might take a detour to not go through this town.
Exactly. Hey, interracial dating. Don't think we need to be. It was those types of things that everyone kind of knew. I remember, the police in the local town I was at told us one day, "Hey, don't make us take y'all into the woods." Right? And, you didn't have to say anything else. Like, all right, okay, cool. Because we understood if they took us out in the woods, then something bad, would happen, and something probably would never happen to them if we told, right? So you're thinking like that. And then you move to places, and I haven't lived here long enough, right, to make any value judgments, in New York. I just know, sometimes you want to stay in these larger metropolitan areas, right?
That's true.
But I see that, in different aspects. And then you have a different, pardon my language, but a different type of white person. Like in the Northeast than you do in the South, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a more solidarity of white ethnic culture here, right, than it is in the South. You know what I'm saying? Folk in the South just look at the world white and black. Right? You know what I'm saying? Here, it's a little bit different, right? You know what I'm saying? So Italians have a little pride, Irish people have pride, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a different kind of concept that all of us have been, oppressed in many different ways. So racism in all different places, looks very different.
Dawnavyn, what was your experience in Missouri, in the Kansas City area?
I saw it more in geographical location, like where my school was, and how some schools were considered black or better, and so the school district just looked different. So my mom was like, well, we need to move out here so you can get a better, because the teaching here and the education here looks different because they're not putting as much money into the inner city schools, but there's better schools out here. So that's how it looked to me in Kansas City, was just by location, like where people were living, what schools, where were people trying to move out to or get bussed out to. And you weren't always allowed to, you couldn't go to a school in a place where you did not live. So then that also restricted just education. So that's how it kind of looked there.
And you've been in Buffalo for a little over a year.
My second year.
Second year.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on this area?
It's cool. It's different. A lot of I was told it's a very enchanting place. There's some really cool places. But yeah, it's interesting.
We'll be back with more after this.
This is the WBFO History Bite, bringing you a peek into significant historical events for the week of October 30th through November 5th. I'm your host, Josh Deckert. On October 31st, 1968, Buffalo's own WKBW broadcast a remake of the War of the Worlds radio drama for Halloween. On November 1st, 1941, the Bell Aircraft Corporation, located in Buffalo, began development on new aviation technology, the helicopter. On November 3rd, 1997, the Buffalo Niagara International Airport opened. The airport now manages over 100 flights daily. And on November 5th, 1993, Nirvana performed at the University of Buffalo. The band played at the Alumni Arena. You've been listening to the WBFO History Bite. Discover more stories about Western New York's past on the Buffalo History Museum's website. You can learn more at buffalohistory.org. For WBFO, I'm Josh Deckert.
That WNED PBS is always working on great new local shows for you to watch. Documentaries like Kleinhand's Gift to Buffalo, which tells the story of Buffalo's music hall.
The hall is very intimate, and that intimacy makes everyone who comes in here feel a part of our family.
Fun and educational series like Compact Science.
Believe it or not, peppers are technically fruits.
And Shakespeare's greatest hits, featuring some of his best-known soliloquies and monologues.
We are such stuff as dreams are made of.
You can watch them all on our website at wned.org/local shows. While you're there, check out the show pages and mini websites for additional content such as bonus features, photo galleries, and lesson plans. Find it all at wned.org/local shows.
Birds, whether common or rare, delight me. That's what our new Now We're Birding and Enjoying Nature Club is all about. Oh yes, and the best is being with people who are also interested in wildflowers, animals, and of course birds. Come along with us, won't you, Peter Hall and me, Stratton Rawson, as we lead monthly excursions to Tift or Rhinestone Woods Nature Preserves. To sign up, go to wned.org/birding.
You're listening to What's Next, our place to discuss the important issues of our communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario. We want to hear from you. Click on the Talk to Us option in the WBFO app, and we will work to get your questions or comments on the air. Do you have a story or concern that we should be addressing? Email us using whatsnext@wbfo.org. Together we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
This is What's Next. Thomas O'Neill White talking Black history, education, censorship, and more with Dr. LaGarrett King, the director of the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education at the University at Buffalo, and Dawnavyn James, an author, social media star, and second-year PhD student in the Department of Learning and Instruction at UB. Dawnavyn is the next guest on Dr. King's Black History Nerds Saturday School program. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this. I was, doing my research and, pulling up these articles on through the University at Buffalo website, and a couple of them were written by my good friend, Danielle LaGarrett. Just want to give her a shout out, girl. Love you.
Love you, girl.
Yes.
She really knocks it out.
I love Danielle.
So I don't even think, do we even get to what you will be talking about for your edition of Black History Nerds?
Yeah, so my plan is to focus on my book, specifically looking at elementary Black History education, what it looks like normally, like looking at only Black history and social studies, but also showing parts of my book where we can expand on Black history education and bringing it into everyday parts in our school schedule. So that's what I'll mostly be focusing on.
And is your book out now?
It'll be out October 31st on Halloween. That's when it publishes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Where can we find it?
You can find it on Rutledge.com, or you can find it on Amazon. But there's a deal on Rutledge, y'all, so you're gonna get $7 off.
What's interesting about Donovan's book, and it's gonna be very powerful, is because elementary teachers are needing this type of education the most. I think they are the ones that really tell us that, hey, we need the help, right? Because in secondary schools, most of those teachers are content experts, right? But in elementary, they're general education people, right? So and since social studies is not really focused on a lot, they miss a lot in their social studies education. So they're very strong in math, they're very strong in literacy, reading, but social studies and science sometimes are their weakest points. So this book is going to be very big for everyone, but particularly those who deal with younger kids.
Something that's stuck with me for a while, and it's asked at events, it's asked through social media. And it's almost something along the lines of, when you were growing up, kindergarten up through high school, up through 12th grade, how many Black teachers did you have? And I could count that on one hand, unfortunately.
Yeah, I had. Oh my goodness, I had two. No. I had 5 teachers, Black teachers, throughout my life. Only one Black male teacher in 7th grade algebra, Mr. Peters. But 5, and I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we're pretty racially diverse.
Yeah, Dawnavyn?
K-12, I had one. She was an English teacher in high school, but in elementary, I didn't have any Black teachers.
So I guess that begs the question. There's got to be an importance to get these teachers of different color, especially African-American teachers, into these elementary schools, into these middle schools, into these high schools.
Yeah. The Black teacher population declined after Brown versus Board of Education, ironically, right? Because I don't think people really explore the history around there. When you talk about integration, it meant integrating into predominantly white spaces, right? Therefore, when the students were pushed out of their neighborhood and community schools to go to these predominantly white schools, then what happened to the Black principals and what happened to the Black teachers? Many people lost their jobs or got demoted, and we haven't picked up since the 1970s in terms of Black teachers, and particularly Black male teachers. So we're looking at, I don't know what, less than 10%, around the country. Now, of course, you go to Atlanta, you grew up in Atlanta or Houston or Dallas or somewhere like that.
You're gonna get that.
Yeah, New York City, right? You'll have more teachers of color, but just in general around the United States, it's not. So there's several different programs to try to help. Build up black teachers again, like the Call Me Mister program out there, and there's Teach for America, and while there's critiques for Teach for America, they have been very important for bringing in teachers of color within particular spaces. So hopefully we can build that up. I know there's plans at the University of Buffalo. I don't want to say anything, but there are plans on trying to increase the population of black and other teachers of color.
Dawnavyn, what's next for you?
So my book publishes, and then try to graduate. Gotta get my coursework done.
What will you be looking to do after that?
I'm still weighing my options. I think I want to be a professor and stay in higher education, but we'll see. I still got time. LaGarrett said I still got time. He's my advisor, so I still got time.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how you guys linked up, just through the advisory process.
So we met in Missouri. Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, Dawnavyn was our babysitter. Yeah. She was. She was our babysitter, and I was really impressed by her because our kids were asleep when we got home every single time. And I was like, wow, what are you doing? Are you putting melatonin in their juice or whatever the case may be, right? And that's been a while because Preston's 13 now, and and my daughter's 10 now. So it's been a while, but she was always quiet and just did her thing and left or whatever after she got paid, right? So she made sure she got paid. And then one day I just saw her at one of the conferences that we had, and I was like, wait a minute, you're interested in Black history? And then I'm like, did you know? And I think she knew, but she never really said anything. I was like,
I didn't know. He opened the door and said, oh, that's the man from the conference. I said, but I'm going to keep my cool, though. I'm going to keep my cool.
and I was just like, oh, okay, why she never said that she's interested in Black? Probably was looking through all our books and all that, probably doing all that at the house and stuff like that. So that's where we met initially, and she was a great teacher in the Columbia, Missouri area, and when we decided to move to the Buffalo area, I just asked her a question. I said, are you interested in getting your PhD? And I think she said, yeah, I am. Well, let's talk about it a little further. So here we are.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. King, what's next for you?
A lot, right? So
tell us about it.
Well, no, the center, we're growing in the center now. Where we have, I believe, 5 doc students and an undergrad student and 2 assistant directors. We're doing lots of programming. So not only Black History Nerds, we do a Researching Race series. We have book clubs that we hold virtually. We're building on the micro-credential. And then, of course, our summer conference is our signature conference, so we're continuously working on that, to bring in hundreds of teachers from around the world to learn about the most effective, instructional practices in Black history. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we're just really working hard on that. I'm just really trying to focus on that, and then focus on my book and everything like that. And
talk a little bit about your book.
1933, Carter G. Woodson wrote The Miseducation of the Negro, which is a collection of essays that, talked about Negro education, business, Negro society life, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. It is a classic book. My book, not titled yet, but it's an answer to miseducation. So the tentative title is Countering Miseducation, Teaching Black History, Teaching Through Black History. That's the tentative title. Mm-hmm. And essentially it's going to talk about my Black History framework and really go into depth with that. So very excited about that. It'll take me a little bit, but very excited about that.
I look forward to reading it when it comes out. with Black History Nerds Saturday School, how can folks tune in for Dawnavyn James' appearance? It's November 11th?
Yes, November 11th. And you can go on the Center for K-12 Black History website through UB.
All right. This is What's Next. I want to thank my guest, Dr. LaGarrett King, the director of the Center for K-12 Black History and Racial Literacy Education at the University at Buffalo and creator of Black History Nerds Saturday School, and Dawnavyn James, second-year PhD student in the Department of Learning and Instruction, author, and social media star. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
This is WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown, your NPR station. That about does it for this episode of What's Next. This has been Thomas O'Neill White. Thank you very much for listening.